Hey there, everybody. My name is Neal Litherland. If this is your first time on the channel, I'm the creator of the Sundara Dawn of a New Age fantasy RPG setting, and I wanted to take today to tell everybody a little bit about it. Because when I first sat down to write this setting, about a year and change back at this point, my main goal was for it to feel familiar to fans of fantasy RPGs, but still have unique selling points all its own that sort of made it stand out from other games, settings you could play in. And when I started asking readers what they wanted to see going forward, when the first couple of splat books for it were dropping, the most common response I got was people wanted to see a fantasy game without alignment at all. And that might not sound like a big deal for folks watching this who are fans of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, because alignment in that setting, while it exists, is kind of vestigial. It doesn't really affect the game too much. But when I sat down to design Sundara in the first place, it was really designed for Pathfinder's first edition. And if you've played that, then you know alignment goes deep there. If you are one of those players who have never really thought about it, I'd recommend checking out my blog entry. Alignment's roots go deeper than you might think. It's linked down there for those who want to give it a read, because, oh boy, this was a bigger task than we thought it was going to be. Because alignment in Pathfinder specifically is kind of like an iceberg, in that there's the part that you see and that everybody's really familiar with and they know, and then there's all this other stuff underneath that it can torpedo you if you're not careful. Because when most people think of alignment, they think of class restrictions. You can't be a paladin and a barbarian because one has to be lawful good and the other can't be lawful. Or if you're a cleric, you have to stay within one step of your deity. If you're a monk, you have to maintain a lawful alignment, etc., etc., etc. There's spells that have to be good or evil, lawful, chaotic, basic stuff. It's annoying. It controls your actions, and lots of players wanted to sort of pull out the toys they normally weren't allowed to play with, make combinations they weren't previously allowed to do, stuff like that. And that's all well and good, and I thought that was a great idea too. But alignment is far more than that, because when you get down to it, alignment is, in a very real way, the moral foundation of your setting. Of Because there's still a lot of gray areas just in your standard 9 alignments chart. But alignment describes a world in which there are capital G good and capital E evil things. There are places and creatures that are made up entirely of these alignments. In this situation, particularly since so many of them are multiplanar universes, heaven and hell are not ideas. They are not discussions or philosophies. These are real places that actually exist. These are places you might go, depending on if you were a good person or a bad person. And somebody needs to have the answers in the back of the book as to whether or not what you did was good or what you did was bad. It doesn't matter what your culture is. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what the norms are. There is a good and an evil and a universal sliding chart that means that some being somewhere can determine whether what you did was good or bad enough, either depending on death or while alive, to know whether or not detect alignment reads you as one type or another type. And I had to get rid of all of that right out the window. Whew. So that meant no more alignment-based domains, no more angels and devils, no more tieflings and Asimar, because without angels and devils you don't have those. Whew. For those who are concerned, I replaced them with a creature type known as the Prim-Touched. More on that in Gods of Sundara and in later videos if you're interested. And it was a lot, both conceptually and just going through and trying to make a setting that had something to replace all of that with. Because that was just all the conceptual stuff and the foundation to get things started. But going forward, it also meant there's a lot of types of plots and various story beats that you're not going to find. As a good example, something that confused a lot of the people who were even initially asking for a game without alignment, you're now not going to have villains who are motivated by that pure evil that we're so used to seeing. You're not going to have servants of dark gods, because there are no dark gods. So, like, all the deities had to be rethought from the ground up. They're now broader ideas that can be interpreted in a variety of different ways depending on what creature, what culture, what civilization is finding them and interacting with them. And you could have multiple countries, multiple creatures, seeing the same being, getting the same teachings, but interpreting it in wildly different ways, which leads to plots like holy wars and various arguments over who's right over the interpretation of certain things, because gods in the prim don't have time for all that. But again, more on that in a later video. And this led to a lot of people, sort of addressing the issue. And it was why I wanted to make a video and talk about it. Because there were a lot of people who argued that without alignment, where's your plot in the world? If you don't know who's a good guy and who's a bad guy, then where are things going? And the answer is there's still conflict in the setting, and plenty of it, even though I haven't released any modules for it yet. More on that later. There's still arguments over who's right and who's wrong, over who gets to use what land, who gets to take what resources. There's guild wars between individuals trying to discover certain alchemical compounds or to create certain devices. There's differences of opinion over whether or not certain land belongs to this town or that town or this creature type or this species. There's still banditry, there's still crime, there's still all sorts of things going on that adventurers can get involved with. It's just not as cut and dry as it used to be. And I think deep down, that's one of the things that makes Sundara an interesting setting. Of you have all of the magic, all of the mystery, all of the potency we're used to in a high fantasy RPG, but there's no one holding you by the hand and telling you what's the good action, what's the bad action. It's up to you as the player and as the character to determine for yourself based on your history, your experience, the culture that raised you, the people you know, the party you travel with. What's the right thing to do in a certain situation? What's the wrong thing to do in a certain situation? And the one that we always have to deal with of when do the ends justify the means for what you're trying to do? And there's no answers in the back of the book on this one. And so for folks who think that sounds interesting or who want to hear more about it, Sundara has recently gone on sale, which is why I'm coming out to let everybody know about it a little more. So check it out, Cities of Sundara, Species of Sundara, and there's a couple of new ones coming out. Just recently started working on them. So check them out. There'll probably be links down below for certain installments. And if you've got questions, leave them in the comments. Let me know so I can figure out what the topic for my next video is. Have a good one, everybody.